So, as you said, this is really two parts this week and next week about dealing with the challenge of anger, which of course is extremely important within a course called Parenting Under Pressure, because pressure brings out either the best or the worst in us, and anger is a challenge. And this is called Why Do We Shout at People We Love? There's a certain irony, which I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems to be much easier to handle other people in a way that we'd like to handle our own. Let me give you an example. Let's imagine you have at home, I don't know what ages you have at home, but let's imagine, just for example's sake, you have at home an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, and that 10-year-old is of the dreamy, artistic variety. Lovely child, beautiful potential, but not necessarily the most organized of personalities. And every day you have the same issue, which is that every day when it comes to bedtime or comes to school the next morning, they never get both shoes in the same place at the same time. Just can't seem to do it. And this is very frustrating, and the pressures of the school time routine, and you tend to get short with them and lose it with them, etc., etc. And why can't you sort yourself out? And why can't you get both shoes in the same place? And it's not so difficult. If you really let rip, you might say, how are you ever going to progress in life? I can imagine you turning up at a job interview with only one shoe because you can't find the other one, or odd shoes. Now, one day you have their cousin, your nephew, coming to stay. And your nephew is made of similar genetic material. And next morning, nephew gets up and says, Uncle or Auntie, I can't find my shoes. And how do we respond? We don't then launch into the full-blooded lecture of, why can't you look up? We go, oh, you can't find your shoes? I am so sorry. Let's have a look, see if they're over here. Are they over here? Maybe they're over here. Oh, look, they're over here. Do you think they went all by themselves? You know what? Tonight, why don't we put a little sticker by the front door? So when you come in and change to take your shoes off, we'll put both shoes, and your child's looking at you thinking, if they knew the word, what a hypocrite. That's not the way you normally respond. If it had been me, you would have gone absolutely sugar at me for losing one of my shoes. If only my cousin could see what you're really like. Now, isn't it strange how we shout to the people we love? And ironically, those for whom we have less responsibility, we know exactly how to handle. Have you noticed how often, I've noticed this, how sometimes we found various people who can be much more charming to somebody else's spouse than their own. Charming, polite. Oh, your husband or your wife is so lovely, always so nice, always so charming. And you watch the recipient of this compliment squirm, and you realize that maybe they're not always that way behind closed doors. Interestingly enough, we are told that after 120 years, the witnesses that come to testify to what we really like are the walls of our house. Because the walls of our house know us best, better than everybody else. It's funny, I don't know if I told you this before, but I was, friends of mine, I dialed them by mistake. And they called me the next day to say that instead of putting the phone down, they decided to listen to how I interacted with my children in the car. I was driving with my children in the car, and I inadvertently dialed some friends, and they listened for 5 minutes plus. And the next day they called me to say how pleased they were to hear that the way that I teach is consistent with the way that I parent. And I thought, thank God it was Tuesday, not Wednesday. Now, this is a challenge we're going to look at tonight. This is a very, very pragmatic challenge. Let me share with you some ideas that I want to build up. Now, whoa, here we go. Slide show from the beginning. Why do we shout at people we love? So let's start with an initial thought. There is a concept which is beautifully articulated by one of the famous thinkers of the 20th century, Jewish thinkers, Rav Dessler. And he says as follows: the will of a human being is his or her deepest essence. In other words, that we each have inside of ourselves what is termed in Hebrew ratzon. Ratzon means will. And ultimately, our actions are driven by that inner will. And if we can access that inner will, it will determine the journey, it will determine the way in which we respond. Now, I want to pose a question. Was there ever a moment, let's take the situation of marriage or children, it doesn't matter, parenting. Was there ever a moment when we really knew how we wanted to do it? How we wanted to be as a spouse or how we wanted to be as a parent? Can you think of a moment in our lives, in your lives, when you had absolute clarity as to how you wanted to parent or how you wanted to respond as a spouse? You can unmute yourselves and give examples, give an example of when that moment was absolutely clear. Any suggestions, please? Let's take the example of marriage. Was there a moment in marriage or about marriage when you had absolute clarity as to how you wanted to handle it in everyday life? Would you like to unmute themselves and let me know? Come on, somebody, talk to me. Or as a parent, was there a moment as a parent when you thought to yourself, I know exactly how I want to parent. I have absolute clarity as to how I want to parent. Anybody there? I can see Lucy and come. Yes, Jenny?
I think you have those moments before you actually have the children.
Right. Great. A colleague of mine gives a talk called I Was a Great Parent Until I Had Kids.
There we go.
What about in marriage? Was there a moment in marriage where you had absolute clarity?
I don't know. I was very young when I got married. So.
Okay, how about this in marriage? Have a look at this photograph. Does anybody recognize anybody in this photograph? Dan, Rabbi, fine, your wife might recognize some of the people in this photograph. Anybody recognize this photograph? Look at this beautiful couple. Don't they look so lovely together? Any suggestions as to who they are? Identify the couple. Anybody? That's because most of you don't know my wife.
My wife's
Wow, that's beautiful.
It hasn't changed over the last almost 32 years. And this person over here is yours truly.
Wow.
Now, this used to hang up in our house. I didn't like that laugh there I just saw, I find it was a bit too hearty. This used to hang up in our house until a friend of mine came in and said to me, that's such a lovely photograph. Is that Carmel with her brother? It came down. So, having stood under the chuppah many a time, imagine if under the chuppah as a rabbi, I go over to the chosn and I say to him, tell me, do you think you'll ever shout at your wife? Or say something hurtful or insulting? If the chosn turned around to me and said to me, well, yes, I might, I would say, okay, if that's how you think, I'm not doing your chuppah. Sorry. At this moment in time, your response ought to be, just can't imagine it. I just can't imagine it. I have such a clear picture as to how I'd like our marriage to be. I cannot imagine ever saying anything unpleasant to my wife. Now, what happens? We have that inner will. We have that inner clarity. What is it that derails that inner clarity? Again, suggestions, please. Inside of us, we each have that inner clarity. What is it that derails that inner clarity? Any suggestions?
Life.
What did you say? Life.
Life.
Spot on. Spot on. You've heard me too many times, Jenny.
Haven't heard this one.
Life is what derails the inner clarity. We know what we want to be, and we have a yearning to be that way. But life, the pressures of life, the pressures of everyday existence, especially in today's circumstance, life derails that inner clarity. Spot on. And even though somewhere deep inside of ourselves, we know how we want to respond, and we know how we want to react, and we know how we want to behave, and we know how we want to talk, but somehow or other, life derails it. And this is going to be the challenge of this week and next week. How can we get back to access that point of clarity? How can we unearth that inner will, which ultimately is the person that I want to be? What I'm going to share with you is not theoretical. What I'm going to share with you is highly practical. And I have myself and a colleague have developed these ideas over well over 10 years and shared it many, many places. And to be honest with you, for me personally, this model has been, without any exaggeration, critical in the way that I handle everyday life. I am not blessed with natural patience, but many, 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 many years ago, I really decided that wasn't good enough, and that wasn't how I wanted to be. Not saying I don't lose my patience, but it is rare, thank God. And this is the model that really I use, and it's completely based on Torah ideology, as you will see as it develops, even though it doesn't look that way as it starts. And that's our challenge. How can we, as it were, circumvent life or remain in control despite what life throws at us, whatever circumstances life throws at us? So first of all, I'm going to share with you the most difficult idea of all, not difficult conceptually, but difficult to internalize. And if one can actually internalize this idea, you're 50% of the way there. And that is that I have a choice. The challenging truth is that I have a choice. And that is both scary and liberating. It's scary because if I have a choice, that means I could have acted differently. And so many times when we lose it, we point the finger outwards. We say, they know that I hate that. They push my buttons. He knows I don't like it when he says that. He knows that irritates me. What am I doing? I'm externalizing our choice, externalizing responsibility. This has nothing to do with me. It's because they and they and they and they and they. The moment that one can actually be brave enough to say, you know what, I have a choice. On the one hand, it is scary because it means I have a responsibility. I can do something about it. It means I could have acted differently. On the other hand, it becomes liberating because if I have no choice, then I'm destined to be this way forever. On the other hand, if I have a choice, no matter how difficult it is to face that reality, then that becomes liberating. I'll give you an example. Some years ago, we were on summer holiday, and I took with me my recently purchased laptop. And I was using it partly for work, partly for pleasure. One of my lovely children was playing with a bottle of juice of some sort and throwing it up and down in the air and catching it. But on one occasion, the child threw the bottle up and did not catch it. The bottle came crashing down onto my laptop and damaged something within the laptop. The laptop never worked again. Now, as you can imagine, all I said to my child was, darling, it's only a laptop. It doesn't matter. It was only £650 with all my work on for the holiday. Don't worry about it. Now, can you imagine a situation like that where you are about to explode at the child? But you don't realize that the front door of your house has been left open. And who should be wandering by but none other than your very own esteemed, deeply respected Rabbi Fine, who's dropping in some latest promotion. And he knocks on the front door, doesn't hear you answer, but the front door is open, and he walks in just in that nanosecond between the moment of the destruction of the laptop and your reaction. And you go from going, hello, Rabbi Fine. That's so nice to see you. Look who's here, darling. It's Rabbi Fine. Oh, that's so nice. Come in. How lovely of you to pop in. Meanwhile, you whisper in your child's ear, wait till he's gone, or something like that. But you don't explode. You don't explode. You react differently. And in all probability, by the time Rabbi Fine has come and gone, you will have found a way to react differently. So clearly, we do have a choice. We do have an option somewhere deep within us. But somehow or other, as Shelley said, life gets in the way and we fail to access it in a way that we can. So I want to stop. excuse me, by reiterating, we do have a choice. And the first response in any attempt at some kind of anger management is to take responsibility for one's reaction and to not allow oneself to say, you pushed me, you drove me to it, you know I hate that. To take responsibility and to allow to say I had a choice. And even in those moments where we get it wrong and we fail, rather than saying, well, you pushed me to it, to say, you know what, I'm sorry, I did not make a good choice. Extremely scary, extremely liberating, and 50% of the way there at least. If one can absolutely promise oneself, I'm no longer going to say it was your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault. It was my fault. I had a choice. What I want to do is now articulate what that choice is. Because if we can articulate it and identify it, then it helps us choose more appropriately. Whoops, that's the wrong slide. Now, I want to argue that we always operate in one of two modes. We're going to give different terminology to this a bit later on, in one of two modes, what I'm going to call big I or small I. Small I is basically driven by ego. Small I means the smaller person, the child within us. In a small I mode, then my ego flashes. In a small I mode, I become defensive. Now, I often feel under attack, and I become defensive, and I start counterattacking. I'll start saying, yeah, but you said this, and you did that. In a small I mode, I personalize. I begin to take it personally. I feel that they are out to get me. The world is out to get me. The kids have ganged up against me. Everybody at work has ganged up against me. I begin to personalize what's happening to me. In a small I mode, very often, I feel as though I am a failure. And the only way of restoring how I feel is by exercising power or by exercising, allowing the ego to speak rather than any other mode. In small I mode, I often feel vulnerable. I feel that I am not succeeding. I feel that I am overall failing in life. I feel vulnerable. In small I mode, I often feel entitled. This isn't the way I should be treated. I'm entitled to be treated better. Why do they know that that's not the way that I like to be treated? I'm entitled. I'm their father. I'm her husband. I'm her son or son-in-law. I'm entitled to be treated better. And small I mode, in summary, is always about the short-term reaction. It's never about the long-term reaction. It's about my instantaneous response in the short term. All that list, and there's probably a longer list, adds up together to a negative reaction, which ultimately is never about fixing the real situation, but about a cameo attempt to take control in the immediacy of the moment. I feel defensive, I personalize, I feel like a failure, I feel vulnerable, and I start waving my Bill of Rights. I am entitled to be treated better. No one should be treated this way, and the whole lecture that goes with it. Let's have a look what happens if I'm able to respond not in small I mode, but in big I mode. In big I mode, I'm able to step back for a moment. Take a step back before I react. Before my ego is challenged or charged, I'm able to take a step back. So for example, let's say I'm having a good day. And let's say I'm feeling confident. And let's say that I'm feeling in control of life. And then someone does something that irritates me. On a bad day, I would immediately move into small I mode. On a good day, I can take a step back and access that inner will and respond in the way that I really want to respond. In big I mode, I'm feeling confident. I'm feeling able. In big I mode, I depersonalize. I don't take it personally, even if it is a personal attack, which may be from a child, or a teenager, or a spouse. I step back and I try and understand a little bit more. I'm not justifying the way that they behave. I'm talking about the way that I respond. I'm able to take a step back and depersonalize it. They're just not in a good place. They're in a small I mode. It hasn't been going well for them. let me take a step back. I don't know if any of you have got teenagers at home, but very often teenagers will sound off and they will attack and say things that shouldn't be said or say things that are hurtful. And if I take it personally, it can be very, very difficult to handle. On the other hand, if I can take a step back, I can depersonalize and recognize that this is what they're going through in this stage of their lives, or they've had a difficult day with friends, or the teacher, or the whole combination. And I realize it's actually, they don't really mean it when they say, I hate you. They don't really mean it when they say, I wish you weren't my parent. They don't mean that, because half an hour later, they'll come around for a hug, or half an hour later, they'll come around for a heart-to-heart. But if I am in small I mode, I'll personalize and respond with a counterattack. Believe it or not, in big I mode, it's actually an opportunity to role model behavior. Opportunity to role model behavior. Example, which I'll give quietly. Last night, in our house, we have 4 lovely teenagers at home. One of them was particularly upset about something seconds after our dollar. Seconds after our dollar. We had a lovely, peaceful Shabbos and nice family time around the table. And straight after our dollar, without any kind of warning signals, they felt particularly aggrieved. As it happens, I was in big I mode. So as opposed to trying to fix their grievance, what I did was listen to their grievance. Listen. Not try to fix, not try to make suggestions or solutions, or to even calm them down, simply to listen. And listening, I only give you examples from home when it all goes right, but listening was the right response, because that's what they needed. They didn't need a solution, they needed empathy. And with empathy, they were able to calm themselves down within a very short space of time. 5-10 minutes later, they had calmed themselves down, were able to see the whole situation different. So in big I mode, I can turn a negative situation into an opportunity for role modeling. In big I mode, I don't feel entitled, I feel privileged. The difference between entitlement and privilege is a world of difference. In the world of entitlement, I have expectations. I think the world owes me. In the world of privileged, I don't have expectations. I want to give. I want to extend myself. I'm prepared to extend myself. I'm able to extend myself because I feel blessed. I feel privileged. In short, big I mode is long-term thinking. Big I mode says, don't let me win the battle and lose the war. I've got to try and stay in control of myself, because ultimately this is about the long term, whether it is parenting, whether it is relationships, or anything. Now, when we are parenting under pressure, of course, it's much, much more difficult to operate in big I mode. We're going to talk about how to operate in big I mode more next week. We're going to touch on it more this week. But it's much, much more difficult, because life is much more intense and there are many more challenging moments, and we ourselves as people feel under the constant pressure of juggling with everything that life throws at us. So it's much more difficult to operate in small and big I mode. But before we come on to some of the hows, let me share with you the following simple observation of how we as human beings talk. That is as follows. We're all familiar with the expression, I let myself down. Ever thought about that expression? It's a strange expression, really, because surely I am myself. When I say I let myself down, I'm recognizing that actually, no, there are 2 parts of me. There are 2 aspects of me. There is a myself, which is a person that I like to be, and there is the I, which is the reaction that I have had. I let myself down. So if we buy into this model, let's start showing how practical it can be. If we buy into this model of big I and small I, as I said, we're going to source it in a Torah source in either this week or next week. We'll see how time goes. But let's first of all recognize that very often our default mode is often the small I mode, by which I mean the emotional reaction. And I would say that we live in a world, sadly enough, where I feel, I hope this doesn't come across as too negative, but there's a lot of default small I mode. I hope this isn't controversial to say, but the current president of America, I would say, is very much a small I mode person. I feel that it reacts very emotionally and we can't take away from what he's done for Israel, which has been great. But as a person, often his response is almost a childlike response. Children, by definition, live in small I mode. It's fascinating how Hashem created children, that they have a full gamut of raw emotions without the intellectual context in which to give them a framework. So a child can feel pride, a child can feel humility, a child can feel embarrassed, a child can feel sensitive. All of the emotions are very apparent very quickly in this child's life without the emotional context which we as adults have. So children, by definition, live in small I mode. Think of the irony if I try and discipline my child whilst I'm in small I mode. I shout at my child to stop shouting. I shout at my child to control themselves. There's a real irony in that. It's like saying to my child, don't behave the way that I'm behaving. I expect you to be bigger than that. A child once said to me, actually, it wasn't about me, but a child once said to me, adults look really funny when they get angry. Well, they do. Because when adults get angry, we behave in small I mode, childlike mode. So if at least we have two modes, if at least we have two modes, then we can diagnose where we are more quickly. We can restore the choice and we can restore control. Let me give you an example, a practical example. You come home from work in the days when we used to go out to work. When you come down from work, if your office is upstairs, and it hasn't gone well, it hasn't been a great day, and you know full well that you can't handle, or you may have difficulty handling, what the children or your spouse is about to throw at you. But you recognize that it's nothing to do with them. It's because I'm in small I mode, because I'm feeling vulnerable, because I'm feeling defensive, because I'm not feeling in a strong place. The ability to diagnose that means that I then have an ability to make a choice about it. Whereas if I can't diagnose it, then the emotions take over completely. So I'll give you another example from work. Recently, I had a meeting at work which I feel that I handled badly. It didn't go well. It was an appraisal of one of my members of staff. It was a good few months ago, and there were some difficult things that needed sharing, and I didn't handle it well. They weren't happy with the meeting. I wasn't happy in the meeting. Afterwards, I thought to myself, well, what went wrong there? And then I identified the fact that the meeting beforehand, which had nothing to do with appraisals of any sort, I can't remember what it was to do with, but was a meeting that hadn't gone well. So I came into the appraisal not in a great state of mind. I came into the appraisal feeling, if you like, emotionally vulnerable. Not surprising, the way I handled the appraisal was not a great way of handling it, because I was in small I mode and I handled it in small I mode. If I'd taken even 2 minutes between meetings to say to myself, 1 second, the fact that I'm in small I mode is nothing to do with the next person coming in. On the contrary, as the person in charge, as their line manager, I have a responsibility to operate in a big I mode. I've got a responsibility to do that. That's the only fair way of operating with them. If I'd given myself that option between the two meetings of understanding where I was at, then I could have had the choice to restore where I was at. So this is really, I'm going to talk for another few minutes and open it out to the floor, because I don't want to rush this, because I think it's really important not to. And it's too much to do in 1 week, which is why we split it into 2. But of course, we have to ask ourselves, when I am in small I mode, how? How can I restore myself to big I mode? What steps can I take? What exercises can I do to restore myself to big I mode? What I've shown this week is we have a choice. Let's do a summary. First of all, we said the inner will drives action. Inner will drives our action. Recognition that deep within us there is an inner will, but we want to do it right. And I believe very strongly that actually we could access that inner will. But life clouds judgment. So step 1 is to recognize that I have a choice. I do have a choice, and to insist that that I take responsibility for that choice. Because once I keep saying to myself, I have a choice, I have a choice, I have a choice, if I don't like the choice I made, well, of course I'm going to work harder to choose differently. Then we talked about the two modes of operation, the big I and small I, which we'll give terminology to next week. And then we talked about the fact that when I understand that, I can self-diagnose. I'm going to finish with two questions before we open out to the floor. First question is an intriguing question in Hebrew. The word in Hebrew for I is ani. Yet the word ani, you can see, has exactly the same letters as the word ayin. Ayin means nothing, to negate. And these two words would seem to be contradictory. Ani is a statement of who I am. Ayin is a statement of negation. But if in Hebrew they are intertwined by virtue of the fact that they share the identical letters, there must be a link between them. Next week we'll look at that link. And we finish with the big question is how? How can I move from small I mode to big I mode? What is the technique to move from small I mode to big I mode? Because in Yiddishkeit and Judaism, there's a golden principle that actions cultivate habits. When we repeat actions, we cultivate a habit. It's a big theme in the performance of mitzvot. There was a great story about someone who came to the late Rabbi Rebbe. This was a woman who described herself to the Rebbe as a mean personality. She felt that she was just a mean personality, was incapable of being kind. And she'd been to various therapists and been to various programs, nothing had helped. And she came to the Rebbe, and the Rabbi Rebbe, and she said to him, "This is my problem. What do I do?" So he said to her, "So be kind." She said, "I don't know how to. What do I do?" So he repeated again, "Be kind." She said, "I don't know what you mean." He said, "Place yourself in a situation where you have to be kind. Go and volunteer in an old age home. Go and volunteer where you maybe at a soup kitchen. Go and volunteer where you have to be kind, because repeated action creates habit." So next week we're going to talk about what actions can I take when I'm in small I mode to move me back into big I mode. Because I'm going to argue, and you don't have to agree, but I'm going to argue that we are always in one mode or the other. There may be extremes of that mode, but if we come back to the original picture of the brain, we're always in one mode or the other. Either I'm in a good space or I'm in a vulnerable space. And there's no middle ground. And therefore, the question is, how can we choose between one and the other? I'm going to open it out here to the floor, to open it out now to the Zoom for questions. But the route next week is to build on this theme and come out with practical examples and practical techniques to choose in big I and small I, and to live in the big I mode more often than not. Okay, time for questions or thoughts. Anybody?
How long does it take on average to transform from little I to big I?
Good question. Well, if you're talking about in terms of an occasion, probably if we get the process right, anything between 1 minute and 5 minutes. How long does it take? How long does it take to habituate oneself to operate more regularly in big I mode?
Yeah.
So that is more of a process. So Yiddishkeit is about growing as a person. Yiddishkeit is about being bold enough to face the challenges we need to face and to take responsibility for them. So that is a process. I mean, I'm not saying that, it's very interesting, but in Pirkei Avos it talks about 4 different temperaments. 4 different temperaments of anger. And there's one temperament that is missing, and that is someone who never gets angry at all. And it's very strong when the classic commentator says, because that is just not reasonable. Only angels never get angry. Very reassuring that he says that. Only angels never get angry. So anger is part of the human condition. But we have to learn that to let it be the rarity rather than the habit. So how long does it take to really habituate oneself? That takes proper inner work. But certainly within a matter of, let's say, weeks, or one can start realizing the benefit of this. Because the beauty of this is, when you go to bed at night and you look back on your day, you don't think to yourself, why did I react that way? It was so unnecessary. It was so unnecessary. I said things which I shouldn't have said. And that terrible pain, having let oneself down, we save ourselves from. And the great benefit of being able to live with oneself and feel more successful and proud of oneself is incredible. So once one starts practicing this, well, you feel the benefits pretty quickly. So in terms of your question, in the instant, between 1 minute and 5 minutes, maybe on a really bad day, longer. In terms of habituation, well, if one starts practicing it seriously, then in a matter of weeks, one can start realizing that actually, I'm getting angry less often than I used to. It used to be 80% of the time, now it's gone down to 70% of the time. And that's a big improvement. Now it's only 60% of the time. I'm seeing the benefits. People around me are seeing the benefits. Because ultimately, this model is built on the number one person I have to change is myself. By the way, that does not mean that others can ride roughshod. That does not mean I then become a doormat and then everybody and everything walk over me. It doesn't mean that at all. But it means that how I stand up for myself has changed. When I stand up for myself has changed. The way in which I stand up for myself has changed.
Can I ask a second question based on the same? So in terms of leadership, okay, in my work, I've got literally nanoseconds between dealing with one issue and the next. And I have to make sure that I let my point of view get known very quickly. So in my leadership role and in my professional role, I need to communicate very, very quickly. So how are you able to be expected to not react in small R mode when it's the situation doesn't allow for it in terms of time?
I'm going to challenge you, Alan, and say that by saying the situation doesn't allow for it, that externalizes responsibility.
Right.
And that's the number one challenge. One has to change one thinking to say, I haven't found a method as yet.
Right.
But I have to find a method.
Thank you.
If I feel the way that I'm handling things is not ideal, doesn't bring out the best of me or the best of other people, then I have to find a method. So first and foremost, I have to take responsibility to find that method. And that is the first. And I said to you, that's why we don't do this all in one session, because if you're serious about this, and we should be, then that first point really needs thinking about. But I have to accept that there is a choice, and there will be a choice, and I have to find a method. So it may be that if I don't like the way that I'm reacting, then I have to. For example, anticipation is a very important conditioner, right? As you can see from my hairstyle, I'm not really an expert on conditioners, but anticipation is a very, very important conditioner. Insofar as if I know that that's what I am facing. It's very interesting. In the Medrash, we often we call the Yetzer Hara, which is the evil inclination or our passions, our emotions. It's seen to be a warrior fighting against us. Now, nobody goes into battle without a battle plan. No sensible general goes into battle without a battle plan. I'm reading a book at the moment, or I've finished reading it, called Extreme Ownership, which is about leadership. It's recommended to me. And it's about the Navy SEALs who fought in Iraq. And it's just mind-blowing how much time they spend on a battle plan. Nothing is, even the spontaneity is planned. I mean that. They plan for every eventuality that they possibly can. Of course, they can't foresee everything. So, if the Yetzer Hara is deemed to be fighting against us, then we have to be prepared to make a battle plan. So let's say at the beginning of the day, I sit down for a few minutes and I understand my pressure points. And I think ahead of time as to how I'm going to handle those pressure points. When I want to handle them in big I mode rather than small I mode. That, for example, would be a very good way of retaining connection with that inner will, as opposed to allowing the emotions to take over. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
But that'd be one methodology. And I mean, you know, that is definitely a methodology that I use. You know, if I know that, so Baruch Hashem at work, it's also pretty busy. And there are better days and harder days. And I'm in the fundraising mode. So definitely there can be, you know, good days and bad days. And you can come off a call which has been, you know, major disappointments, and then have to face a meeting with the whole team, you know, and it's not their problem that you haven't had a great fundraising day or whatever it's going to be, but somehow or other you better, if I want to operate in a way that the team expects and the team is entitled to expect, then I've got to try and build that into my system. And the more that I acclimatize myself to thinking in big I mode, the more I can access it quickly. I'm going to say that again. The more that I acclimatize myself to thinking in big I mode, the more I can access it quickly. Because what it really means is, the more I'm in control of my emotions, rather than my emotions in control of me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, so next week is part 2 and part 3. I hope you can see why I decided to insert these two within this of parenting under pressure, because it's absolutely vital that even under pressure, as often as we can, we access big I mode. I would say even under pressure, especially under pressure, we access big I mode, because under pressure, the pressure plus small I mode is an explosive recipe. Explosive recipe, and a recipe for great regret and pain. And you know, it's funny because this isn't just about saving others from pain, but saving myself from pain. It isn't fun to think back in the evening on a day where it hasn't gone well. It doesn't make anybody feel good. So even if this is for selfish mode, because I want to operate differently, you know, it's worthwhile accessing. But it's not just that. This is life-changing in terms of interaction with others. So particularly when we are under pressure, we need tools to be able to access big I as often and as frequently and as quickly as we can. So I'm sorry to leave you on an absolute cliffhanger. I don't know if anybody you remember the old Batman days. Remember Batman episodes where you always used to think, anyone know what I'm talking about? The cliffhanger, you know. Will Batman survive the oncoming train? Just 10 meters away, so we kind of need to finish, you know. Will you all manage this week without the complete picture of accessing big I mode? Or is it going to be a week of explosions? Can Rabbi Herman put it all together in a stroke of blinding genius in next installment? Or will he give way to pressure too? Tune in to find out more.
Thanks, Rabbi.